Thank you so much for attending my PowerPoint presentation on World of Warcraft's most evil villains. First up is Arthas. Arthas Menethil stands as one of the most tragic villains in Warcraft history, which is precisely why he's only number 8 on this list. You see, the man went from beloved paladin prince to undead tyrant, and while that transformation involved genocide, patricide, and creating an army of the damned, he had the ultimate excuse. A cursed sword made him do it. Extraordinary, I know. Let's start with the culling of Stratholme, where Arthas decided the best way to save his citizens from becoming undead was to preemptively murder them himself. The logic here is genuinely fascinating. Rather than evacuate, quarantine, or literally attempt any other solution, he chose to personally slaughter his own people in the streets. And here's the thing, he did this before picking up Frostmourne. This was just good old-fashioned zealous paladin decision-making. The sword hadn't corrupted him yet. He was simply that committed to his kill them to save them philosophy. The situation naturally deteriorated from there. Arthas pursued the dreadlord Mal'Ganis to Northrend, where he found Frostmourne, a blade so obviously cursed that it was literally stuck in a block of ice surrounded by warning signs. He picked it up anyway. The sword immediately consumed his soul, which he presumably should have seen coming, and he returned home to Lordaeron, where he murdered his father, King Tyrannus, walked right into the throne room during a celebration, and stabbed him. Truly a heartwarming family reunion. After that, Arthas spent several years committing atrocities across the eastern kingdoms. He killed Sylvanas Windrunner and raised her as a banshee specifically to torment her. He destroyed the high elf kingdom of Quel'Thalas and corrupted the Sunwell, turning one of the most sacred sites in Azeroth into a fountain of undead energy. He raised fallen heroes as Death Knights against their will, forcing them to serve the very army that killed them. And when he finally reached Icecrown Citadel and merged with Ner'zhul to become the Lich King, he gained control of the entire Scourge, an undead army numbering in the millions. But the reason Arthas ranks at number 8, despite this impressive resume of war crimes, is that cursed sword defense. Frostmourne genuinely did steal his soul. Most of his worst acts were committed after he'd lost his humanity entirely. His final words as the Lich King were, "I see only darkness before me," suggesting some fragment of Arthas remained trapped inside, aware of what he'd become, which is very sad and definitely makes the whole murdered thousands of people, turn them into an undead plague thing, more understandable. I'm sure he'd appreciate your sympathy. Next up is Azshara. Queen Azshara was a night elf monarch whose vanity was so astronomical that it literally broke the planet in half. Unlike Arthas, who has his cursed sword excuse, Azshara made every terrible decision entirely of her own volition because she believed herself too beautiful and powerful to face consequences. She was correct about the beautiful part, wrong about the consequences part, and frankly, that makes her significantly more evil than our tragic prince from Section 1. Azshara ruled the Night Elf Empire 10,000 years before World of Warcraft begins, and she spent that time being so phenomenally narcissistic that she named her elite guards the Highborn, because of course she did. She became obsessed with the Well of Eternity, a massive font of magical power, and decided that opening a portal to invite the Burning Legion to Azeroth would be a fantastic idea. Why? Because Sargeras, the leader of said Burning Legion, told her she was pretty and promised her more power. That's it. That's the reason she nearly ended all life on the planet. This decision triggered the War of the Ancients, which killed millions of Night Elves and other races. When it became clear that the Legion invasion was going poorly and the Well of Eternity was about to implode, Azshara's response wasn't remorse or attempting to fix anything. Instead, she made a pact with N'Zoth, an old god, to save herself and her most loyal followers. The well exploded anyway, causing the Sundering, an event that literally shattered the supercontinent of Kalimdor into multiple separate land masses. The world map you see in WoW exists because Azshara wanted more magic. N'Zoth transformed Azshara and her highborn into the Naga to survive underwater, which you'd think would be a humbling experience. It was not. She spent the next 10,000 years at the bottom of the ocean in her palace city of Nazjatar, plotting her revenge and maintaining beauty standards despite now being part octopus. Let that marinate for a second. She had tentacles and still considered herself the most beautiful being in existence. When she finally resurfaced during Battle for Azeroth, her plan was to betray N'Zoth, claim his power, and reshape reality to her liking. She nearly succeeded too, which is genuinely impressive given that she had 10,000 years to plan and still managed to fail at the last moment. The woman enslaved her own people, transformed them into sea monsters, kept them trapped underwater for 10 millennia, and her response to finally being defeated was essentially "I'll be back." Azshara ranks at number 7 because while her evil is entirely self-motivated and her body count includes most of a continent, she's ultimately driven by personal personal ambition rather than cosmic scale ideology. She's not trying to destroy the universe. She just wants to rule it and be worshipped, which is almost refreshingly honest compared to what's coming next. Moving on to Garrosh. Garrosh Hellscream represents what happens when daddy issues metastasize into full-blown fascism. He began as an insecure warrior desperate to prove himself worthy of his father's legacy, and he accomplished this by becoming war chief of the Horde and immediately implementing Orcish supremacy as official policy. Thrall's decision to appoint him remains the worst personnel choice in Warcraft history, which is genuinely impressive considering Thrall also trusted Putris, who literally committed bioterrorism. Garrosh's evil is distinct from Arthas and Azshara because it's ideological. He wasn't corrupted by a cursed weapon or motivated by personal vanity. He genuinely believed that orcs were the master race and that genocidal conquest was the appropriate method of governance. His first major act as war chief was bombing Theramore with a mana bomb, which is functionally a nuclear weapon. He killed Jaina Proudmoore's people, destroyed an entire city, and when questioned about civilian casualties, his response was essentially that was the point. But Garrosh didn't just commit war crimes against the Alliance. He turned on the Horde itself. He enslaved the Trolls, imprisoned Vol'jin for questioning his leadership, and treated every non-orc race as inferior and expendable, which is a fascinating approach to leading a multiracial faction that depends on cooperation for survival. The Tauren, Forsaken, Blood Elves, and Goblins were all considered second-class citizens under his regime, which you'd think would immediately trigger a civil war. It did, actually. That's exactly what happened. When the rebellion closed in, Garrosh resurrected the heart of Y'Sharj, an old god that died 10,000 years ago, and used its power to corrupt the Veil of Eternal Blossoms. This was a sacred Pandaren location, beautiful and untouched for millennia, and Garrosh turned it into a hellscape of Shah corruption because he needed more power. The old god energy did corrupt him further, but here's the critical detail. He'd already committed most of his atrocities before touching Y'Sharj's heart. The bombing of Theramore, the enslavement of Horde races, the ethnic cleansing policies. Those were all pure Garrosh. After his defeat at the siege of Orgrimmar, Garrosh was put on trial for war crimes. His response to the charges was to escape via time travel to an alternate universe where his father hadn't drunk demon blood, and then convince that timeline's orcs to form the Iron Horde and invade the main timeline. Let me be clear. When faced with accountability for genocide, Garrosh's solution was to create a multiversal army and attempt genocide again. At least he's consistent. The Iron Horde campaign killed thousands more before Garrosh was finally killed by Thrall in Mak'gora, an orcish honor duel. His last words were, "I regret nothing," which honestly tracks. You have to respect the commitment to never learning or growing as a person across two separate timelines. Garrosh ranks at number 6 because his evil is systematic and ideological rather than opportunistic. He weaponized genocide as policy, embraced fascism willingly, and when given a second chance in an alternate universe, he immediately did it all again. From Orcish supremacy to old god corruption to multiversal war crimes, let's move to planetary destruction. Deathwing. Deathwing, originally known as Nelthorion the Earth Warder, was a dragon aspect tasked with protecting Azeroth. He responded to this responsibility by attempting to destroy the planet multiple times across 10,000 years of history. His corruption began with whispers from the old gods, which is a legitimate excuse for maybe the first few centuries of madness, but at a certain point, you have to take accountability for your actions. That point was probably around the time he betrayed every other dragon aspect and created a super weapon specifically designed to murder them. The Dragon Soul, later called the Demon Soul, was Neltharion's masterpiece of treachery. He convinced the other aspects to empower an artifact that would aid them in the War of the Ancients, and then immediately used it against them. This weapon allowed him to siphon their power and nearly killed them all, which is genuinely one of the most efficient betrayals in Warcraft history. He then used this power to help cause the Sundering alongside Azshara, which makes him partially responsible for shattering the supercontinent. Two villains on this list contributed to breaking the world apart. Extraordinary, I know, but Deathwing's defining moment came during the Cataclysm expansion, when he emerged from Deepholm and literally tore Azeroth apart. His entrance is the most dramatic in WoW history. He exploded out of the Maelstrom, flew across the world, setting everything on fire, and destroyed entire zones in the process. Thousand Needles flooded completely. The Barren split in half. Darkshore was shattered. Aberdeen was deleted from existence. Thousands died in the initial emergence. violence, and thousands more perished in the environmental disasters that followed. The reason Deathwing needed such a dramatic entrance is because his body was physically falling apart from old god corruption. The whispers had driven him so insane over millennia that his own flesh was tearing itself to pieces. Goblin engineers had to design elementium plates and bolt them directly onto his body just to hold him together. Let that marinate for a second. His physical form was the manifestation of bad life choices. You could literally see the consequences of listening to eldritch whispers bolted onto his spine. The spine of Deathwing Raid involved players climbing onto his back mid-flight and ripping these plates off while he tried to shake them loose by doing barrel rolls. His jaw fell off during combat. Chunks of his armor had to be pried away to expose the corrupted flesh beneath. And after all that buildup, all that apocalyptic destruction, all those dramatic voice lines about being the destroyer, he was killed by a giant dragon laser beam while flying backwards through the maelstrom. Truly a dignified end for someone who nearly destroyed the world multiple times. Deathwing ranks at number 5 because while Old God corruption provides some excuse for his initial betrayal, he spent 10,000 years actively choosing to follow through on world-ending schemes. He had millennia to reconsider. He didn't. He required metal plates to function and still committed to the bit. Plus, his son Nefarian was also evil, which suggests some questionable parenting even before the corruption fully set in. From a dragon who physically embodied his terrible decisions, we move to the orc who damned his entire species. Gul'dan. Gul'dan was the first orcish warlock, and he achieved this distinction by betraying every shamanic tradition his people held sacred in exchange for demonic power. He was a crippled outcast before Kil'jaeden, a leader of the Burning Legion, offered him strength, and Gul'dan responded by selling out his entire species. Not just metaphorically, he literally enslaved every orc on Draenor to the Burning Legion by convincing them to drink the blood of Manaroth, a pit lord. This act corrupted the orcs for generations, turned their skin green, and damned them to demonic servitude, all so Gul'dan could have personal power. The blood curse that transformed the Orcish clans from shamanistic people into a demonic war machine. Gul'dan then opened the Dark Portal, which connected Draenor to Azeroth, and sent the corrupted horde through to conquer a new world. This decision directly caused the First War and the Second War, conflicts that killed hundreds of thousands across both factions. The entire alliance versus horde conflict that defines World of Warcraft exists because Gul'dan wanted more power and didn't care who died to get it. He created the faction war as a side effect of his ambition. When chieftains like Durotan, Thrall's father, questioned his methods, Gul'dan had them assassinated. He raised fallen heroes from the First War as the first generation of Death Knights, which were not the Arthas-style Death Knights, but rather orcish souls shoved into human corpses. These abominations served the Horde during the Second War until Gul'dan betrayed everyone again by abandoning the siege of Lordaeron to seek more power at the tomb of Sargeras. His first death is genuinely poetic. Gul'dan entered the tomb of Sargeras seeking godlike power, and the demons inside tore him apart for his arrogance. You'd think this would be the end of his story. It wasn't. During the Warlords of Draenor expansion, an alternate timeline version of Gul'dan was brought to the main universe, and he immediately repeated every single mistake. He made deals with the Legion, attempted to summon Sargeras directly, and opened another portal to let demons invade Azeroth during the Legion expansion. This alternate Gul'dan's plan involved using the Pillars of Creation to open a massive portal at the tomb of Sargeras, which is the same location where the original Gul'dan died seeking power. He learned absolutely nothing across 2 separate timelines. His second death came when Illidan absorbed the power meant for Sargeras, consuming Gul'dan in the process. So both versions of Gul'dan died trying to claim power from Sargeras and getting killed by the consequences. Gul'dan ranks at number 4 because he damned his entire species for purely selfish reasons. There's no corruption excuse, no tragic fall, no ideology beyond I want power and I don't care what it costs. He condemned generations of orcs to demonic corruption, created the faction conflict that killed millions, and when given a second chance in an alternate universe, he did it all over again. He was trained directly by Kil'jaeden, betrayed everyone who trusted him, and his skull literally became a warlock legendary weapon after his death. The man's legacy is so comprehensively evil that his remains are still being used for dark magic. From the orc who sold his people to demons, we move to the entity who orchestrated nearly every villain on this list from behind the scenes. Zovaal. The jailer, whose actual name is Zovaal, was the Eternal One who ruled the Maw, which is functionally the hell of Warcraft's afterlife. He was retconned into being the mastermind behind nearly every major villain in WoW history, which the community received about as well as you'd expect. Blizzard decided that Arthas, the Lich King, the Burning Legion, and most other catastrophes were actually orchestrated by this one entity from the Shadowlands, and players responded by asking why they should care about any villain ever again if they're all just puppets. Valid question, honestly. Zoval created the Helm of Domination and Frostmourne specifically to corrupt Arthas. He forged domination magic itself, which means the entire Scourge, the Lich King's power, and Arthas's fall were components of a plan spanning thousands of years. He worked with the Dreadlords, the Nathrazim, who infiltrated the Burning Legion and manipulated events across the cosmos. The Jailer's goal was to reach the sepulchre of the First Ones, claim the power of creation itself, and unmake reality so he could rebuild it according to his vision of perfect order, which is genuinely ambitious. You have to respect the scope even if the execution was narratively questionable. Before his imprisonment, Zoval was the Arbiter, the entity responsible for judging souls and sending them to appropriate afterlives. The other Eternal Ones discovered his plans to remake reality and imprisoned him in the Maw. So he spent eons plotting his revenge. And when he finally broke free, he rewrote the soul sorting system. Every soul that died, regardless of morality or deeds, was sent directly to the Maw to fuel his power and suffer infinite torture. Heroes, villains, innocents, children, everyone went to hell. This went on for years of in-game time before anyone noticed something was wrong with the afterlife. The Jailer manipulated Sylvanas Windrunner for decades, convincing her that the current system of life and death was unjust and needed to be destroyed. She served him loyally, committed war crimes in his name, and burned Teldrassil, killing thousands of night elves to feed souls to the Maw. Then she betrayed him the moment she realized his perfect order meant enslaving everyone forever. Which tracks? Everyone betrays everyone in this expansion. His design is notable for featuring prominently displayed nipples, which became a community meme. Why does the cosmic entity ruling the afterlife need visible nipples? I don't know what to tell you. The Shadowlands expansion was widely criticized for its convoluted story, retconning established lore, and poor character motivations, and the Jailer's design choices didn't help matters. When finally defeated, Zoval's last words were, "You don't understand." Classic bad writing. He attempted to explain his motivations at the last second, something about a greater threat he was trying to prepare for, but it was too little too late. The heroes defeated him with the combined power of all four Shadowlands covenants, and he was sentenced to the Maw himself to spend eternity saving the souls he damned, which is poetic justice, but doesn't undo the torture of millions. The Jailer ranks at number 3 because despite the community's negative reception to his retconned existence, his actual crimes are cosmic in scale. He tortured infinite souls in the Maw, orchestrated the corruption of Arthas and the creation of the Scourge, manipulated the Burning Legion's activities, and attempted to unmake all of reality to impose his vision of order. Every major villain before him was potentially his pawn. The scope of his evil spans the entirety of Warcraft history, even if players wished it didn't. From the Puppet Master, who controlled individual villains, let's move to the entities that corrupt entire civilizations. Old Gods. The Old Gods are 4 cosmic parasites sent by the Void Lords to corrupt Azeroth's world soul and transform the planet into a servant of the Void. Their names are Sithun, Yogg-Saron, N'Zoth, and Y'Sharj, and collectively, they are responsible for more evil in Warcraft history than nearly any other force. They didn't just commit atrocities themselves, they created the conditions for most other villains on this list to exist. Deathwing, Ashara, the Emerald Nightmare, the Shah that empowered Garrosh, all of these trace back to Old God corruption. They are the source code of evil in this setting. Y'Sharj was the strongest and first to die. The Titans ripped it out of Azeroth during their ordering of the planet, which seems like a good solution until you realize that killing it created a permanent wound in the world, and its death released the Shah, manifestations of negative emotion like fear, anger, hatred, and despair. These Shah plagued Pandaria for 10,000 years and were later used by Garrosh to corrupt the Veil of Eternal Blossoms. Y'Sharj died millennia ago and is still causing problems. Let that marinate for a second. The Titans learned from this mistake and imprisoned the other 3 old gods rather than killing them. Sithun was sealed beneath Silithus, where it created the Chiraji insect empire and waged war against the Night Elves during the War of the Shifting Sands. Yogg-Saron was imprisoned in Ulduar, and its whispers drove countless mortals insane across the ages. It corrupted the Emerald Dream into the Emerald Nightmare, created the Curse of Flesh that transformed the Titans' stone-forged servants into mortal races, and is directly responsible for humans existing. You're welcome, by the way. The Curse of Flesh turned Vrykul into into humans, Makag gnomes into gnomes, and Earthen into dwarves. Mortality, disease, weakness, all side effects of Yogg Saron's corruption. And Zoth was the weakest old god physically, but the most manipulative. It corrupted Deathwing over thousands of years, transformed Azshara and her highborn into the Naga, and orchestrated plots spanning millennia from its prison beneath the ocean. When it finally broke free during Battle for Azeroth, players defeated it in a single patch after 15 years of buildup. The community was not pleased, and Zoth's death is also questionable. Old gods are theoretically unkillable because their roots are so deeply embedded in Azeroth that destroying them fully would damage the planet itself. Whether Inzoth is actually dead or merely banished again remains deliberately ambiguous. The old gods created servant races, the Faceless Ones, the Akir, and the Enraki. They whispered madness to mortals for thousands of years. Yogg Saron's famous voice line, "Bow down," before the god of death, was spammed so frequently in Ulduar that it became a meme. Players farmed them for loot like their oversized calamari, which is genuinely disrespectful considering these entities are existential threats to planetary existence. Sithun in particular was mathematically impossible to defeat when the raid first released, requiring Blizzard to nerf the encounter because guilds were wiping for weeks. The old god's goal was to corrupt Azeroth's world soul, the nascent titan growing inside the planet, and transform it into a void entity that would serve the Void Lords. If successful, this would have created a dark titan powerful enough to destroy the Pantheon and end all ordered reality. Their corruption spans the entirety of Azeroth's history. They are behind Deathwing, Azshara, the Emerald Nightmare, the Curse of Flesh, the Shah, and countless other catastrophes. Every major villain who used old god power or corruption traces back to these four entities. The old gods rank at number 2 because they are the source of most evil in the Warcraft setting. They are planetary scale threats whose corruption shaped the entire history of Azeroth. They cannot be fully killed without damaging the world itself, which means they are effectively immortal existential threats. And despite being imprisoned, dead, or questionably defeated, their influence continues to corrupt and destroy. From cosmic parasites that shaped millennia of suffering, we move to the entity who decided the universe itself needed to burn. Sargeras. Sargeras was the most powerful warrior of the Titan pantheon, tasked with defending the universe from the Void Lords and their corrupting influence. He discovered demons and old gods during his mission, witnessed the depths of cosmic corruption, and his response was to decide that all life in the universe needed to be destroyed preemptively. "I'll save everything by killing everything" is not a philosophy. It's a mental breakdown with cosmic consequences. The Burning Legion was Sargeras's solution to corruption. He gathered demons, corrupted the Eridar race by empowering Kil'jaeden and Archimond, and created an army dedicated to destroying all life across the universe, not conquering, annihilating. His goal was systematic genocide that would prevent the Void Lords from ever corrupting another world soul. He literally became the thing he swore to destroy, which is poetic in the way that getting hit by an ambulance is poetic. Sargeras attempted to destroy Azeroth multiple times throughout history. He was behind the Burning Legion's invasion during the War of the Ancients 10,000 years ago, which Azshara facilitated. He orchestrated the corruption of the Orcs and their invasion of Azeroth, which Gul'dan enabled. The Third War, Archimond's attack on the World Tree, the Legion expansion, all attempts by Sargeras to destroy Azeroth's world soul before the old gods could corrupt it. During the Legion expansion, when it became clear that the mortal races would prevent his invasion, Sargeras stabbed the planet. He literally took his sword, which is larger than mountains and visible from space, and plunged it into Silithus. The blade missed his actual target, the world soul in Azeroth's core, but it's still there, still sticking out of the planet like the universe's most awkward landmark. The wound bleeds Azerite, which is functionally Azeroth's blood infused with Sargeras's corrupt essence, and this substance caused the entire faction conflict of Battle for Azeroth. His sword is still causing problems years after his imprisonment. The Pantheon of Titans had to intervene directly to stop him. They imprisoned him in the seat of the Pantheon, which required every Titan working together because Sargeras was the strongest of them. The Legion expansion built him up for a decade as the ultimate threat, and he was imprisoned in a single cinematic after stabbing the planet. The community noted that realistically his sword should have destroyed Azeroth entirely, but were overlooking that for gameplay purposes. Sargeras's legacy is universal in scope. He destroyed countless worlds and civilizations across the cosmos. He cleaved the planet Mardum in half, which became the Demon Hunter starting zone. He created Argus the Unmaker, a corrupted titan that resurrected demons infinitely. Kil'jaeden and Archimond, two of the most powerful demons in existence, served him willingly. The Burning Legion was responsible for millions of deaths across Azeroth alone, and Azeroth was just one target among thousands. Sargeras ranks at number 1 because his evil operates on a universal scale. Every other villain on this list had goals limited to Azeroth or personal power. Sargeras wanted to incinerate all life in the universe as a mercy killing to prevent worse corruption. His cleansing fire is genocide with cosmic justification. He was the most powerful single entity in Warcraft lore, and even imprisoned, his sword continues to wound the planet. Players farm Azerite, which is his blade's corruption mixed with Azeroth's essence, for power. From a paladin corrupted by a cursed sword, to a vain queen who shattered the world, to a fascist warchief with daddy issues, to a dragon whose body manifested his corruption, to the orc who damned his species, to the afterlife tyrant who orchestrated it all, to cosmic parasites that corrupted millennia of history, we arrive at the Titan who decided the only way to save the universe was to destroy it. In conclusion, Warcraft villains prove that the path to damnation is paved with bad decisions ranging from picked up cursed sword to decided to incinerate the universe, and you should absolutely play them. Peace on planet Earth.